Hi, I'm Nate Seberg, and welcome to One Day Ahead. This is Romeo and Juliet in 75 minutes. Let me tell you what's going on here. This video is a mashup of my Romeo and Juliet summary and analysis series. Actually, it's just the summary part. I grabbed the summary section from every single episode and stitched them together here in one kickback and watch video that will take you through the whole book. If you want the analysis part as well, then check out the free full episodes on YouTube or head to onedayahead.com to see the full series. All right, let's go. So the prologue of Romeo and Juliet, it's not really that hard to understand. It's pretty straightforward, but it can be kind of hard to get your head around why it exists in the first place. Like, what are we doing here? Because we don't really have a solid analog for this in our popular culture. Because what we have here, the prologue, it's not like a trailer, it's not a preview. What it is, it would be like, imagine if before a movie starts, if everyone who appeared in the film showed up on screen and told you exactly what was about to happen in the movie. You want to talk about spoilers? This is the movie being ruined for you by the actual movie. But there is a reason for this, I think. But before we get there, we're going to take the prologue line by line real quick. Here we go. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, which is a city in Italy, where we lay our scene. So households, don't think like a home in the suburbs. So when they say households, think gangs. From your first cigarette to your last dying day. These family-based gangs transcend and exist in every social class. You have the street-level thugs, the captains, the cousins, immediate family members, and then at the top, a patriarch who runs the show. From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Okay, their fight has been going on forever, and it's about to flare up again. Civil blood, blood of their fellow countrymen, will be spilled. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives. Loins, that means nether regions. Here it means kids. Loins is a gross word. So the kids of these two ancient families become star-crossed lovers. More on that in a minute. And it will end when they take their life, meaning they will both kill themselves, which is a bummer. Also, don't miss the double meaning of the word fated. It's predestined, sure, but also like in terms of fatal, it'll get you killed. Whose misadventured, piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. So it's a bummer, but it does ultimately serve to bury the strife between the families, which means it ends their feud. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which, but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. So all that stuff, the strife, the loins, the love, the suicide, the making up, that is our next 2 hours. So buckle up. The which if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. If we miss something, just watch the play, you'll figure it out. So there you go. This, by the way, is what's known as a sonnet, which means it's a 14-line poem. 10 syllables per line, it has a rhyme scheme and a rhythm. It kind of like, it sounds good. We'll see these throughout Shakespeare, especially when noble characters are talking about noble, momentous, or emotional things. But for my money, the most interesting line in the prologue is when Shakespeare refers to Romeo and Juliet's relationship as star-crossed. You may have heard that term before, star-crossed lovers, and this is where it was invented. Shakespeare just straight made it up. So in Shakespeare's culture, like today, there was a strong association between the stars and destiny or fate. If your future is written in the stars, it is fixed, immovable, immutable, a fact beyond our mortal reach. Critically, Romeo and Juliet's love, though, is star-crossed, meaning thwarted by the influence of a malign star. Literally, that the stars are against them, that their fate is fixed and decidedly tragic. Which brings me back to the function of the prologue in the first place. Like, why does Shakespeare start his play with a full-throated spoiler? Because at some level, it takes the fun out of it. In someone else's hands, this story could have been a will they, won't they romp through fair Verona, where we follow these two crazy kids sneaking around, getting in trouble, and we're left on pins and needles, hoping that they make it. My parents just don't understand, you ruined my life, true love conquers all, you had me at hello, etc. But no, that type of story is taken away from us brutally and in 14 lines. Have no doubt, audience, you have come to watch a train wreck. Why? Well, I don't know. But one interesting observation I've read is that the prologue itself provides the audience with a sense of fate as well. We are put in the position of the stars themselves, knowing that these kids' fate is written and that nothing can change what is about to happen. And that positioning, it changes how we watch. What would otherwise be hope that they would make it in the end is instead channeled into a sense of empathy, of pity even, as we watch these hopeless lovers live out the end of their doomed lives. Romeo and Juliet. It ain't a comedy. And that's the Act 1 prologue. So this play begins with two guys we will never see again, engaging in 40 lines worth of wordplay. It's not totally without value, but parsing all these arcane references takes us so deep for so little payoff that I'm skipping it for this video. If you want to go deep down that particularly nerdy rabbit hole, check out Act 1, Scene 1, Samson and Gregory. It's the next video, but also trust me when I say it's real skippable. Anyway, these two guys, Samson and Gregory, are Capulet thugs, and they are out on the streets of Verona talking a big game about how they're not punks. Predictably, along come some Montague servants whom they insult by biting their thumbs, which apparently was a thing. After some back and forth, everybody draws swords and they have a big old fight. Nobody on stage matters so far, but the commotion brings two who do. Benvolio Montague, who is nephew to Mr. Montague and Romeo's cousin, and Tybalt, who is nephew to Mr. Capulet and Juliet's cousin. Benvolio tries to stop fighting by drawing his sword to part the combatants, but Tybalt responds awesomely with what? Drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues, and thee. Have at thee, coward. So that's fantastic. The disturbance is so great, citizens of Verona come in with clubs to beat everybody up. Then old Mr. Capulet and Montague show up along with their wives, and finally the Prince of Verona himself. The ultimate authority turns up and he says enough. This is the third time this nonsense has happened. I'm done, and the next person to disturb the peace will be tortured and killed. So he's pretty over it. The action from here sticks with Benvolio, who checks in with Big Daddy Montague and his wife, Lady Montague. Lady Montague asks after her son Romeo, saying, "Right glad I am that he was not at this fray." So, as luck would have it, Benvolio has seen Romeo. "Madam, the hour before the worship's sun peered forth the golden window of the east, a troubled mind drove me to walk abroad, where, underneath the grove of sycamore, so early walking did I see your son. Toward him I made, but he was ware of me, and stole into the covert of the wood." But hiding in the forest is not the only thing our little buddy has been up to. Big Daddy Montague picks up the tale from there. He says, "Many a morning hath he there been seen, with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew. But also soon as the all-cheering sun should in the furthest east begin to draw," so when the sun comes up, "away from light steals home my heavy son, and private in his chamber pens himself, shuts up his windows, locks fair daylight out, and makes himself an artificial night." So he's roaming around all night and then he hides during the daylight hours. Totally possible that Romeo is a vampire. So just then Benvolio sees our depressed boy coming around the corner and he vows to figure out what's troubling him. The parents peace out and Benvolio gets right to it by asking Romeo, what sadness lengthens Romeo's hours? Not having that which having makes them short. In love? Out. Of love? Out of her favor where I am in love. Okay, her refused to a woman we will never actually meet in the play. Her name is Rosaline, and Romeo has a lot of feelings about her. He expresses his mixed up feelings through contradictions that read frankly like bad melodramatic poetry. Oh brawling love, oh loving hate, oh anything of nothing first created. Oh heavy lightness, serious vanity, mishap and chaos of well-seeming forms, feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still wax and sleet. That's not what it is. So do you see what he did there? He found opposites and then he put them together. It's insights like that keep my audience coming back. Like and subscribe. Finally, the contradictions progress to full-on disassociation when Romeo says, "Tut, I have lost myself. I am not here. This is not Romeo. He is some other where." Benvolio keeps after him, saying, "Tell me in sadness," which in this case means like in all seriousness, or better yet, like with sobriety. "Who is that you love?" Romeo screws around a bit longer before the stunning omission. "In sadness, cousin, I do love a woman." But it turns out Rosaline is not just any woman. As Romeo is happy to tell us, she is a stone-cold hottie with only one problem. She has sworn to die a virgin. Benvolio can't hardly believe it. "Then she hath sworn that she will live chaste?" "She hath, and in that sparing makes huge waste. For beauty starved with her severity cuts beauty off from all posterity." So because she can't have babies and pass her babies on, it's cut off from posterity. "She's too fair, too wise, wisely too fair to merit bliss by making me despair. She has forsworn to love, and in that vow do I live dead that live to tell it now." So Romeo, I'm gonna level with you. She doesn't sound like that much fun. You may have dodged a bullet here. There's nothing wrong with being a virgin, but swearing for life? Maybe keep your options open? I don't know. Adolescence is terrible. Benvolio tries a direct attack. Be ruled by me, forget to think of her. How? By giving liberty unto thine eyes. Examine other beauties. Go check out the other fly Veronan honeys. But Romeo doesn't want to hear that. He goes full on emo. He says that any other woman would only make him think of Rosaline's beauty more, and he would rather just go home and stay in his room and be forever depressed over the perma-virgin. In our first scene, we find him to be tragic, dramatic, depressed, into bad poetry, contradictions, and possibly a vampire. And that's the summary. So scene 2 opens on Big Daddy Capulet talking with Paris, the most eligible bachelor in Verona. We catch them mid-conversation about the prince's promised death sentence should any more violence break out before Paris quickly shifts topic to his suit, meaning his request to marry Capulet's daughter, Juliet. And Big Daddy Capulet drops some important context in his reply. He says, "My child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride." So Juliet is 13, which is, and I know this is a different time, it's a different context. It's unfair to judge their choices against the morality that was formed by my cultural upbringing and norms. That's fine, but my argument is, and hear me out, ew. She's 13, and that's gross. So, fun note here, when Capulet instructs Paris to let 2 more summers wither in their pride, he is using an agricultural metaphor. He is saying, let the crops pass twice more through their summertime prime, their pride, and begin to wither with the coming of autumn. Afterward, then, like a farmer's crop, Juliet will be ripe for picking, which is a weird way to talk about your daughter. But bottom line, Big Daddy Capulet asks Paris to wait 2 more years. I would have recommended, 15. Your 20s are really fun, everyone. But he assures Paris that he loves the idea, just not the timing. But hold on, it also turns out that tonight, Capulet is throwing a huge party, and he invites Paris to come and begin wooing Juliet. With that, Capulet turns to Peter, his servant, and gives him a piece of paper with a list of those he invited to the masquerade party. It's like a short notice masquerade party. It's one of those. Peter is meant to seek out the people on this list, but once he is alone on stage, he admits that he cannot read. Stay in school, kids. So Peter goes out in search of help, and he comes across Romeo and Benvolio. Benvolio is still getting after Romeo about getting over Rosaline. He says, "Tut man, one fire burns out another's burning." He means find a new woman and your feelings over Rosaline will burn out. It proves to be good advice ultimately, but also that is objectively not how fire works. We don't stop a forest fire by lighting another bigger forest fire. Peter walks by and interrupts them for help with his I can't read problem, and Romeo agrees to read the list aloud. It's full of Viennese muckety mucks, but he lights up when he comes across one entry in particular: my fair niece Rosaline and Livia. Suddenly, Romeo is all ears, and he finds out that this invite list is for a Capulet party, and what's more, Peter invites them too, saying, "And if you be not of the house of Montague, I pray come and crush a cup of wine." First of all, I love that euphemism for getting drunk. Crush a cup of wine. And also, they definitely are of the house of Montague, but they decide to go anyway, but for 2 different reasons. Benvolio says, "At this same ancient feast of Capulets sups the fair Rosaline, whom thou so loves, with all the admired beauties of Verona. Go thither, and with unattainted eye compare her face with some that I will show, and I will make thee think thy swan a crow." Romeo's response is intense and worth the effort to understand. He says, "When the devout religion of mine eye maintains such falsehoods, then turn tears to fire, and these who often drowned could never die, transparent heretics, be burnt for liars." Okay, so heretics were burnt at the stake because they believed that the devil would protect them from drowning. So Romeo is saying that if his eyes claim to see someone more beautiful than Rosaline, then they would be transparent or clearly heretics. And since his tears cannot drown his eyes because of the old wily devil, his tears will turn to fire and burn out his eyes. Yeah, it's a lot. But honestly, considering what we know about Romeo so far, it kind of tracks. So ultimately, Romeo agrees to go, but not because he thinks Benvolio might be right. Instead, he goes simply to see Rosaline and be generally sad. Because he hates himself, I guess. What he says is that he's going to rejoice in splendor of mine own, but there hasn't been a lot of rejoicing recently, so I don't see how this is going to help. And that's the summary. So it's just before the start of the big Capulet party, and Lady Capulet is talking to Juliet's nurse. Don't think like this, that meeting of nurse is actually pretty modern. Instead, this lady was like Juliet's wet nurse, and now she's like a nanny. The nurse is told to fetch Juliet, and she responds, "Now by my maidenhead at 12 years old, I bade her come." So that line perfectly encapsulates the way in which the nurse is a disaster. She's lovable, but she's not the brightest, and she often misses common sayings in slightly sexual ways. The real saying here apparently is "by my head," like if I'm lying, you can decapitate me. But she gets it wrong and swears by her virginity, which apparently she still had at 12. So Lady Capulet just wants to ask Juliet what she thinks about marrying Paris, but the nurse is going to walk all over this conversation. One of the things you'll notice with Shakespeare is the way in which social rank is reflected in the characters. The aristocracy are refined, elegant, noble. Their words flow, fully formed and glittering in often perfect iambic pentameter. It's vaulting, it's noble, and you go like this for some reason, but those further down the social ladder are increasingly hapless, tactless, crude, cruel, or bumbling. The nurse is very much the latter. After declaring rather unnecessarily that she only has 4 teeth, she will prattle on and on and on through a meandering story that goes pretty much nowhere. She pauses for one line from Lady Capulet, which is, "Enough of this, I pray thee hold thy peace," and the nurse responds, yeah, for sure, and then immediately tells the entire story over again. Finally, after roughly forever, Lady Capulet breaks in and shoots Juliet straight. "Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married?" She responds, "It's an honor that I dream not of." I love this response because, like so much of what Juliet says, it can be read in 2 different ways. Is she saying it's such an honor it's beyond her wildest dreams, or it's an honor but not one that she wants to have? More on this in the analysis. Her mom is like, "Well, get dreamin', kid, because it is time. Women, well, girls, younger than you are already mothers, and Paris has chosen you." Lady Capulet goes on to note that this is a good match for the status and the pocketbook of the family. After one more quick sex joke by the nurse, she asks directly, "Speak briefly, can you like of Paris's love?" Juliet responds, "I don't know, my brain won't be fully formed for years." No, she doesn't say that. She says, "I'll look to like, if looking liking move." That's what she says. And that response is killer. This kid, who has no higher purpose in this society than to marry well for the honor, status, and wealth of her family, gets an offer from the richest guy around and basically says, "Maybe, if I like what I see." How awesome is that? Then she softens it by adding, "But no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly." They head down to the party, and that's the summary. We are back with the boys on the cusp of the big party at the Capulet Manor. Big house. Romeo is a Montague, and he's still a major buzzkill. Benvolio is also there, and so is a new character, their friend Mercutio, who, by all accounts, is a crazy person. Romeo wonders if they should announce themselves when they come into the party, which was apparently the custom, and it's insane since they are party crashing. Benvolio responds with some wordplay, "But let them measure us by what they will. We'll measure them a measure and be gone." All 3 of those measures mean different things, and that's clever. Romeo, though, is in no mood to dance. "Give me a torch. I'm not for this ambling, being but heavy, I will bear the light." "Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance." "Not I, believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead, so stakes me to the ground I cannot move." Ugh. This guy sucks. They select masks to hide their faces and are on the cusp of knocking on the door, and yet still Romeo is refusing to dance. And that, friends, is when Mercutio goes off the freaking deep end. They're talking about, honestly, it doesn't matter, but it sends Mercutio into a 43-line fever dream speech. It's called the Queen Mab speech, and it's decently famous, but for all the wrong reasons. It's about a fairy, and she comes into people's dreams, and yeah, you can do some digging and funhouse mirroring and find some themes that resonate within the play, but really just don't. It's not worth it. And I'm sure there are going to be people in the comments or whatever who say, like, "I understand this speech perfectly, and here's all the deep resonant meanings," but they don't have any friends. I could take you through it, but honestly, it's going to be a lot of me shrugging and speculating what substance Shakespeare was on for that particular evening. After the speech, Benvolio says, "This wind you talk of blows us from ourselves. Supper is done and we shall come too late." I love that even he is like, this is a huge waste of the audience's time, but Romeo's next line keys up the tension and makes us sit up straight. "I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars shall bitterly begin this fearful date, with this night's revels and expire the term of a despised life closed in my breast, but some vile forfeit of untimely death." Well, he's not wrong. They knock, enter, and that's Act 1, Scene 4. Scene 5 begins in the kitchen of the Capulet party. Dinner is over and the servants are clearing up. They have some typically clever repartee full of double meanings, and it's mostly nonsense and you should skip it. In line 15, we rejoin the action with Big Daddy Capulet welcoming Romeo and his crew to the party. It's a masquerade situation, so Capulet doesn't know that this is the son of his sworn enemy. He opens by coyly declaring, "Ladies that have their toes unplagued with corns will walk about with you," meaning dance. Then he promptly explains, "Aha, my mistresses, which of you all will now deny to dance? She that makes dainty, she, I'll swear, hath corns." He's like, do you see what I did there? With the corns? Capulet continues playing the jovial host, while Romeo moves about the party. Then his eyes fall on Juliet and the world stops. He asks a passing servant, "What lady is that which doth enrich the hand of yonder knight?" Yonder knight is presumably Paris. In the movie, it's Paul Rudd who plays it as such a wide-eyed goober. I love it. I only bring it up to show you my favorite single frame of the movie. There it is. God, that guy loves a balloon. Makes me so happy. The servant doesn't know, and Romeo continues, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers make blessed my rude hand." So after the song, he is going to watch where she goes and then touch her hand, which, we need to talk about consent. He continues, "Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night." So goodbye, Rosaline. Also, I'm sure the servant is like, dude, I'm just here to serve the hors d'oeuvres. May I offer you a salmon puff? So we're going to get that hand-touchy moment in a second, but first our attention is shifted to Tybalt, who happens to be passing by and overheard the masked Romeo. He IDs him by his voice. This by his voice should be a Montague. "Fetch me my rapier, that's a sword, boy. What dares this slave come hither, covered with an antic face, to fleer and scorn at our solemnity? Now by the stock and honor of my kin, to strike him dead I hold it not a sin." Remember scene 1 when we talked about masculine honor? Tybalt has no breaks. "Give me my sword, I'm killing this guy right now." Luckily for Romeo, Big Daddy Capulet intercepts Tybalt on the way to the sword closet. Sword check? "Uncle, this is a Montague, our foe, a villain that is hither come in spite to scorn at our solemnity this night." "Young Romeo, is it? 'Tis he, that villain Romeo. Content thee, gentle coz, let him alone. He bears him like a portly gentleman, and to say truth, Verona brags of him, to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. I would not for the wealth of all this town here in my house do him disparagement." So far Capulet has been all jovial host and corn jokes, but when Tybalt pushes, we learn who's really in charge here. Tybalt starts, "I'll not endure him, he shall be endured." "What, goodman boy, I say he shall. Go to. Am I the master here or you? Go to. You'll not endure him, God shall mend my soul. You'll make a mutiny among my guests. Go to, you are a saucy boy." So that's fun. Tybalt relents, but not before privately vowing, "I will withdraw, but this intrusion shall, now seeming sweet, convert to bitterest gall." Finally, we shift back to Romeo, and he is captivated by Juliet. Watching his chance, Romeo steals forward and takes her hand. When he speaks, he selects a metaphor where Juliet is a holy shrine, and he is a pilgrim paying homage. Romeo starts, "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips, two blushing pilgrims ready stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Juliet is totally game. She comes back, pushing the metaphor further. "Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrim hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss." So a palmer is a Christian who had taken a pilgrimage to Palestine to visit the holy sites. As a symbol of their journey, they would return with a palm leaf folded into the shape of a cross. Juliet is teasing Romeo. Palm to palm, so like prayer, that is a holy palmer's kiss. Romeo, "Have not saints lips and holy palmers too?" "Aye, pilgrim, lips they must use in prayer." "Oh, then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do, they pray. Grant thou, lest faith turn to despair." "Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take." So Juliet, who is a holy statue in this metaphor, says, "Saints grant prayers, but they do not move." And Romeo is like, "I am fine with that." He kisses her, saying, "Thus from my lips, by thine, my sin is purged." Now, what I love about Juliet, like I said, is that she is game. She is not wilting or weak or swept away. She knows what she wants, and what she wants is Romeo. Her next line is an invitation, and Romeo does not miss it. "Then have my lips the sin that they have took? Sin from my lips, oh trespass sweetly urged, give me my sin again." Then they make out for a while. Finally, the nurse approaches, and they, I assume, surface for air. The nurse says that Juliet's mom wants a word. Romeo asks the nurse who's her mother and learns in one terrible moment that she is a Capulet. The boys rally up to leave, and our attention shifts back to Juliet. She calls the nurse over and engages in some clever misdirection. She asks after a bunch of people at the party and then finally asks who that is, pointing to Romeo. The nurse goes to investigate, and Juliet speaks aloud. If he be married, my grave is like to be my wedding bed, which is foreshadowing. The nurse returns. His name is Romeo, and a Montague, the only son of your great enemy. Juliet wraps it up with this. My only love sprung from my only hate, too early seen unknown and known too late. Prodigious birth of love it is to me that I must love a loathed enemy. And that is the end of Act 1. So the Act 2 prologue is dumb and you should skip it. It doesn't really add much, and some critics believe it wasn't even written by Shakespeare, that it was added later by somebody else. So now the whole play is written by Shakespeare and some guy named Larry. It basically takes 14 lines to say that the love for Rosaline is dead and that Juliet is the hot new girl. It also says their family dynamics are a disaster and it's gonna make it really tough for them to see each other. There, I did it in like 4 lines. I'm so good at this. Homeschool high five. And that's the prologue. In Act 2, Scene 1, we follow Romeo out of the Capulet front door and back into the night. His head is spinning over Juliet. He wants to go back, and he quickly gives his boys the slip by jumping over an orchard wall. Benvolio and Mercutio call out to Romeo, attempting to conjure him back by invoking Rosaline, which is so 45 seconds ago. Keeping with my theme of pointing out all the dirty jokes, Mercutio says, I conjure thee by Rosaline's bright eyes, by her high forehead and scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg and quivering thigh, and the domain that there adjacent lie. So I conjure you by all this stuff, her thighs and, the stuff around there. When Benvolio says, careful, you're going to anger him, Mercutio volleys back. My invocation is fair and honest, and in his mistress's name, I conjure only but to raise him up. If you're like, is that an erection joke? It sure is. A bit more back and forth wraps up Scene 1, with Benvolio and Mercutio giving up their search and going to bed. And that's Scene 1. Scene 2 is famous. It's Shakespeare at his absolute best. Now we're back with Romeo, who has just broken into the Capulet orchard. And he can hear Mercutio's taunts and responds to himself saying, he, meaning Mercutio, jests at scars that never felt a wound. Which, tap the brakes there, Casanova. You moped about Rosaline the Perma Virgin, and then you kissed Juliet while she just literally stood there. My wound. Suddenly, he sees a light through Juliet's bedroom window. By the way, soft in Shakespeare means wait or go slow. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Juliet comes to the window and stares out. Then she starts talking to herself, saying rather famously, O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? So everyone misunderstands this. Wherefore does not mean where, it means why. She is saying, why are you a Montague? She continues, 'tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's a Montague? It's not a hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other word would smell as sweet. So then she offers a deal to the knight. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. Romeo, still creeping in the bushes, can't help himself. He calls out, which was probably pretty surprising. I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo. My ears have not yet drunk 100 words of that tongue's uttering, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo and a Montague? He responds, neither, fair maid, if either thee dislike. Juliet, showing good instincts, declares that Romeo will definitely be killed if her family finds him here. Then Juliet asks, by whose direction foundest thou out this place? Which I always thought was funny. This is literally the backyard of the house that he was just in. I don't think a compass was involved. Juliet returns to the matter of true love. She names that Romeo has heard her speak aloud about her love. She offers to play coy and hard to get for etiquette's sake, but she doesn't want to. She loves him and she swears to be true. Romeo goes to swear back, but he doesn't get very far. Lady, by yonder blessed moon I vow, that tips with silver all these fruited treetops, she interrupts. Oh, swear not by the moon, thy inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable. What should I swear by? Do not swear at all, or if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the god of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee. Romeo goes to swear again, and again Juliet cuts him off, saying, well, do not swear. Although I joy in thee, I have no joy in this contract tonight. Here, when Juliet says contract, she is not being hyperbolic. Marriage in 1600s England didn't require a big formal process to be considered hitched. No registering with a local authority or church. You know what it took? It took two people swearing that they love each other and you were married. Now, if you want your marriage to have legal weight, it required a single witness, but that was it. So Romeo is literally proposing that they get married right now, here in this garden. It's no wonder Juliet taps the brakes. So they go back and forth for a while. You get a sense that nobody wants to end this conversation. It's a lot of like, no, you hang up. No, you hang up. It's about, you didn't hang up. So the nurse calls Juliet in, and when she emerges, she has a plan. 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow by one that I'll procure to come to thee. When and what time thou wilt perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee my lord throughout the world. After 12 more no you hang-ups and almost goodbyes, Juliet says, good night, parting is such sweet sorrow, that I shall say good night till it be morrow. And that is scene 2. It's the next morning, and a new character, Friar Lawrence, is gathering medical herbs in the pre-dawn light. He is ruminating on contradictions and paradoxes, that the earth is both a place of death and a womb of birth, that his herb can be both poison and medicine, that anything good can be twisted and used for ill. For not so vile that on the earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nor aught so good but, strained from that fair use, revolts to true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice being misapplied, and vice sometimes by action dignified. So 30 lines of this is plenty. Thankfully, Romeo arrives. A quick note on friars here. Lawrence is a member of the Franciscan friars. He's like a monk. He has taken a vow of poverty and chastity and obedience to the teachings of Christ. He's like a monk in that way, but while monks live largely withdrawn from the world, living life in self-sustaining monasteries, friars engage with and minister to society. So he is a known, trusted member of the society and a spiritual guide to Romeo. When Romeo arrives so early in the morning, he assumes something must be troubling him. Young son, it argues a distempered head, so soon to bid good morrow to thy bed. He spends a while on that before he finds the truth. Or if not so, then here I hit it right. Our Romeo hath not been in bed tonight. He assumes Romeo has been with Rosaline, but then Romeo catches him up to speed. Then plainly know, my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet, and mine on hers, so hers is set on mine, and all combine save what thou must combine. When and where and how we met, we wooed, we made exchange of vow, I'll tell you as we pass, but this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today. The friar is floored by this, and he's like, go back a second. He dresses Romeo down for how he handled things with Rosaline, and his analysis is incisive, saying that he was doting, not loving, and that Rosaline had him figured out. Oh, she knew well, thy love did read by rote that could not spell, meaning he sounded like he had memorized a book of love poetry rather than speaking it from his heart. I bring this up because it's nice to see an adult yelling at Romeo. It's kind of cathartic. With Romeo firmly chided, he returns to the point. He consents to marry Juliet and Romeo in secret, but only from a place of pure utility. In one respect, I'll thy assistant be, for this alliance may happy prove to turn thy household's rancor into pure love. And while this action does resolve the conflict, the families ultimately will be bound not by love, but by grief. And that's scene 3. Scene 4 opens to Mercutio and Benvolio, still wondering where Romeo is. It's the next morning, and they have learned 2 facts. 1, Romeo never came home last night. And 2, Tybalt sent a formal challenge to the Montague house demanding a duel. This is Tybalt making good on his vow after he discovered Romeo attending the Capulet party in Act 1, Scene 5. Benvolio is confident that Romeo will answer it, meaning accept the challenge, but Mercutio says Romeo has already been slain, metaphorically, by Rosaline. From there, Mercutio discusses Tybalt, and he's not real charitable. He calls him the Prince of Cats. Tybalt was another word for cat, and he basically says that he's a pretty boy who, like a kitty, is all fluff. He's pretentious, fashion-forward, and though he trains with a sword, for him, it's more about style than actual combat. Finally, Romeo arrives, and they quickly notice he is still in his party clothes. Mercutio assumes he's been with Rosaline and begins comparing her mockingly to famous beauties of antiquity, saying she must outshine them all. We will come back to that in a second. Romeo and Mercutio then get into good-natured mockery. It's jokes, and it threads its way through with lines and lines and lines of wordplay. We could go into it, but it gets so dense and the payoff is so nowhere near worth it, I'm not doing it. With that, the nurse arrives, and together with Romeo, they hatch a plan. Juliet is to devise some means to come to Shrift this afternoon. Shrift is confession. And there she shall, at Friar Lawrence's cell, be shrived, which meant absolved of sin, and married. Finally, the nurse furnishes Romeo with a rope ladder so he can climb up to her bedroom on their wedding night, which is in like 8 hours or something. I don't know. They met yesterday. The nurse hurries home and Romeo goes, hopefully to shower. And that's scene 4. So Juliet is at home and she is freaking out. It's been 3 hours since she sent the nurse to her love, Romeo, and she is positively dying for her to return with his answer. It's 3 long hours, yet she has not come. Had she affections and warm youthful blood, she would be as swift in motion as a ball. We're doing tennis now, the nurse is the ball. My words would bandy her to my sweet love, and his to me, but old folks may feign as they were dead, unwielding, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. It's here that I always remember, oh yeah, she's 13. Suddenly, the nurse is back, but rather than coming out with the news, she holds back, having fun with her young charge. I am aweary, give me leave a while. Fie, how my bones ache, what a jaundice have I. I would thou hast my bones and I thy news. Nay, come, I pray thee, speak, good nurse, speak. Hey, Sue, what haste? Can you not stay a while? Do you not see I am out of breath? How art thou out of breath when thou hast breath to say that thou art out of breath? So it goes on like this for a good 50 lines. Right when she is at the cusp of answering, she pulls the rug out again. Sweet, sweet nurse, tell me, what says my love? Your love says, like an honest gentleman, and a courteous, and a kind, and a handsome, and I warrant a virtuous, where is your mother? So after adequate torture, the nurse comes out with it. Romeo is waiting with Friar Lawrence, asked to go to confession, and there he will make you man and wife. Juliet flushes with excitement and leaves. And that's Act 2, Scene 5. Scene 6 you'd think would be a bigger deal. This is it, Romeo and Juliet taking the fate-sealing step of joining in marriage. But Shakespeare keeps it surprisingly brief. Romeo is confident and ready to go, saying he doesn't care what happens after if only they are wed. Do thou but close our hands with holy words, then love devouring death, do what he dare. It is enough I may but call her mine. Friar Lawrence, however, is more careful, warning, these violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. Juliet arrives, they exchange words of love before Friar Lawrence says, come with me, and we will make short work. For by your leaves you shall not stay alone till Holy Church incorporate 2 in 1. They exit and are wed off stage, and that is Act 2, Scene 6. With the marriage of Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare has built his love story up to its fullest height. We have a perfect union between perfect strangers who have cast off all doubt, caution, and common sense and have been secretly wed. Nothing left to do now but burn it all to the ground. Which is why Scene 1 opens on gasoline and matches. The day has turned hot, and Mercutio and Benvolio are walking along the streets of Verona. Benvolio can feel trouble in the air. I pray thee, good Mercutio, let's retire. The day is hot, the Capulets abroad, and if we meet, we shall not scape a brawl. For now, these hot days is the mad blood stirring. Mercutio gets after Benvolio, saying he shouldn't lecture anyone about quarreling since he does it all the time. It's more Mercutio wordplay nonsense, which is fun, I guess, but it also gets old really fast. But no worries, because here come the Capulets. It's Tybalt looking to settle his score with Romeo for the unspeakable slight of attending his uncle's party. Boy, when you put it like that, it really doesn't sound so bad. From the outset, Mercutio overtly baits Tybalt. Tybalt starts, "Gentlemen, good evening. A word with one of you." And but one word with one of us? Couple it with something. Make it a word and a blow. You shall find me apt enough to that, sir, and you will give me occasion. Before they can come to blows, though, the cause of Tybalt's wounded pride arrives. It's Romeo, fresh from his secret marriage to Juliet. Tybalt doesn't really ease into anything. He's not real subtle. Romeo, the hate I bear thee can afford no better term than this. Thou art a villain. Romeo's response must have been baffling. This is a society dominated by the ever-present need to defend masculine honor at all times and at all costs. These people were regularly killing each other over perceived slights, and here comes an enemy with an unequivocal insult in public. Romeo says, "Tybalt, the reason that I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting. Villain I am none, therefore farewell, I see thou knowest me not. Boy, this shall not excuse the injuries thou hast done to me, therefore turn and draw. I do protest I never injured thee, but love thee better than thou canst devise, till thou shalt know the reason of my love. And so, good Capulet, which name I tender as dearly as mine own, be satisfied." And here, Mercutio's head basically explodes. Oh, calm, dishonorable, vile submission. Mercutio will not stand for this. He draws his sword, swears to take one of Tybalt's 9 lives, and attacks. Romeo and Benvolio struggle to part them, and it's in this chaotic shuffle that Tybalt slips his sword under Romeo's arm and stabs Mercutio. Having spilled blood, the Capulets flee, while Mercutio cries out. His speech, as he nears death, vacillates between wit and tragedy. It's like he's dying, but he also cannot really believe it. At first he calls his wound a scratch, but then he says, "No, 'tis not so deep as a well, nor so wide as a church door, but 'tis enough, 'twill serve. Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man." Then Mercutio, who is neither a Capulet nor a Montague, sums it all up pretty nicely. He cries out, "A plague on both your houses." Then he turns to Romeo with something else he can't understand. "Why the devil came you between us? I was hurt under your arm." What I'm struck by most of all here is how terrible it must be to die utterly confused. To Mercutio, none of this makes sense. Like why Romeo suddenly allowed this slight on his honor, or why he stepped between them in the first place. This poor guy is still making jokes about Rosaline. He is way, way behind. Benvolio leads Mercutio away so he can go die somewhere else, and Romeo is left alone on stage to wonder how this happened. He's only been married for an hour, but that doesn't stop him from blaming his wife. "O sweet Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate, and in my temper softened valor's steel." Benvolio returns, announces that Mercutio is dead, and then suddenly and quite inexplicably, Tybalt comes back. Maybe he forgot his phone. Romeo, in his grief and consumed with rage, draws his sword and kills his... well, let's see, it's his wife's, mother's, brother's, so his cousin-in-law thing? With Tybalt dead, Romeo cries out, "Oh, I am fortune's fool," before he is whisked away. From here, in the scene that just won't end, the prince of the city is back with the citizens of Verona. Remember, the prince is responsible for keeping the peace, and he declared all the way back in Act 1, Scene 1, that the next person who disturbs the peace will be killed. Benvolio gives an account of what happened here, and he argues it was Tybalt and Mercutio who broke the peace, and since both of them are dead, maybe we call it a day. Good work, everyone. Good dueling, good fancy talking. We'll see you next week. Lady Capulet, though, is all like, whoa, 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 what about Romeo? He still killed somebody. The prince makes his ruling and wraps up the scene. "And for that offense, immediately do we exile him hence. I have an interest in your hates proceeding. My blood for your rude brawls doth lie a-bleeding." So Mercutio was the prince's relative. "But I'll amerce you with so strong a fine that you will all repent the loss of mine. I will be deaf to pleading and excuses. No tears nor prayers shall purchase out abuses. Therefore use none. Let Romeo hence in haste, else when he's found, that hour is his last." And that's Act 3, Scene 1. Scene 2 opens before the news of the last scene, what with the death of 2 characters and the banishment of Romeo, has reached Juliet. She is blissfully unaware and passing the time thinking about her upcoming wedding night, and her speech is very spicy. Lovers can see to do their amorous rites by their own beauties, or if love be blind, it best agrees with night. Come, civil knight, that somber-suited matron all in black, and learn me how to lose a winning match. Lose a winning match. So what she plans on losing here is her virginity, but she also wants to win at it? I don't know. Sex is a competition, and Juliet is here to play. Really, what she might win is a baby at 13. I assume she knows this. It's not clear how good sex ed is in 1600s Verona. Anyway, she continues to no one. "Come, gentle knight, come, loving black-browed knight, give me my Romeo, and when I shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun." So to die was Elizabethan slang for having an orgasm. I told you, it's spicy. This goes on for 35 lines until the nurse enters, visibly distraught. She's shouting things like, he's dead, and obviously Juliet is freaking out, but she can't get the nurse to use a proper noun. It takes a while to nail down the particulars of who is indeed dead. When Juliet learns the facts, she doesn't handle it well. "Oh, serpent-hearted, hid with flowering face, did ever dragon keep so fair a cave?" Basically, it's a lot of Romeo is super hot, but actually evil. Here's some more. "Beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical, dove-feathered raven, wolfish raving lamb, despised substance of divinest show, just opposite to what thou justly seemest, a damned saint, an honorable villain." So I like this reaction in Juliet. She's going to turn it around here in a moment, but her first reaction, and it goes on for 12 lines, is anger and cursing. It's only when the nurse is like, "Yeah," that Juliet slams on the brake and is like, "Whoa, how did, that is my husband." The nurse starts, "There is no trust, no faith, no honesty in men, all perjured. Shame come to Romeo." Juliet responds, "Blistered be thy tongue for such a wish. He was not born to shame. Upon his brow shame is a shame to sit." So Juliet chides herself for doubting, something she will not do again. Then she double downs hard on her devotion to her new husband. For her, the tragic word here is not death of Tybalt, it's banishment of Romeo. Romeo is banished. To speak that word is father, mother, Tybalt, Romeo, Juliet, all slain, all dead. Romeo is banished. There is no end, no limit, measure bound in that word's death. No word can that woe sound. Sound here actually has two meanings. Sound means to express, but to sound water meant to find its depth. So this woe is not only beyond expression, but it's also so deep we can't find the bottom. And with that, Juliet is exhausted. She takes the rope ladder and goes to her wedding bed, declaring that death, not Romeo, shall take her virginity. Finally, the nurse takes pity on Juliet. She will go to Romeo, who was hidden in Friar Lawrence's cell. Quick note here, cell means like house or cottage or whatever, not like prison cell, though maybe it should. Stay tuned on that. Anyway, that's Act 3, Scene 2. Act 3, Scene 3 joins Friar Lawrence harboring Romeo and desperate for news. Romeo kicks off Scene 3 by using the word doom 4 times in 6 lines. In this context, doom meant like sentence or judgment, not necessarily calamity, disaster, or ruin. Why? Latin. I don't know. Leave me alone. After learning the prince's sentence, Romeo says, "Ha! Banishment? Be merciful, say death. For exile hath more terror in its look, much more than death. Do not say banishment. Hence from Verona art thou banished. Be patient, for the world is broad and wide. There is no world without Verona walls, but purgatory, torture, hell itself." Lines 12 through 70 are basically filled with Romeo saying, "This is really bad," and the friar's saying, like, "It could be worse," and Romeo's like, "I don't know, I think I'd rather be dead," and the Friar Lawrence is like, "Hear me out." They go back and forth. Finally, the nurse knocks. She takes one look at Romeo, who's flat on his face at this point, and goes with a tough love approach. "Stand up. Stand up, stand up, you be a man. For Juliet's sake, for her sake, rise and stand. Oh, why should you fall into so deep an O?" He asks after Juliet, and the nurse responds, "She is not great." "Oh, she says nothing, sir, but weeps, and now falls on her bed, and then starts up, and Tybalt calls, and then on Romeo cries, and then down falls again." Romeo is desperate. He declares again that it's his name that's the problem. He demands to know where his name is lodged and draws his sword so that he can cut it out of himself. And that is a bridge too far for the friar. He has heard enough, and he goes full-on gender stereotyped, "Are you even a man? Hold thy desperate hand. Art thou a man? Thy form cries out thou art. Thy tears are womanish. Thy wild acts denote the unreasonable fury of a beast. Unseemly woman in a seeming man, an ill-beseeming beast and seeming both." Then he lays it out, saying, "You've got enough light. Let me count the ways. What, rise thee, man? Thy Juliet is alive, for whose dear sake thou wast but lately dead. There art thou happy. Tybalt would kill thee, but thou slewest Tybalt. There art thou happy. The law that threatened death becomes thy friend and turns it to exile. There art thou happy. A pack of blessings light upon thy back. Happiness courts thee in her best array, but like a misbehaved and sullen wench, thou pouts upon thy fortune and thy love." The friar then makes a plan. Step 1, go to Juliet and comfort her, and maybe apologize for killing her cousin. Step 2, leave her tonight before the city watches at their posts, or slip out at dawn disguised, otherwise you'll be killed. Step 3, flee to Mantua and wait while we publicize your marriage, reconcile the families, beg forgiveness from the prince, and organize a super fun surprise homecoming party. Oh, I ruined it. Romeo agrees, departs, and that's Act 3, Scene 3. Scene 4 opens with Big Daddy Capulet and Lady Capulet talking with Paris and showing us that they are behind the times. Paris is here to woo Juliet, but she is penned up in her room weeping. They assume over the death of Tybalt, which is half right. Then, for reasons that are not entirely clear, Mr. Capulet makes a sudden executive decision. "Sir Paris, I will make a desperate tender of my child's love. I think she will be ruled in all respects by me. Nay, more, I doubt it not. Wife, go you to her ere you go to bed. Acquaint her of my son Paris's love." Son here is a term of endearment. We don't have like an incestuous marriage thing going on, but for more on that theme, read Hamlet. After some what day is it today shenanigans, they compare their schedules. It's Monday night and he decides that Paris and Juliet will be married on Thursday. As almost an afterthought, Mr. Capulet sends his wife to tell Juliet of her forthcoming marriage, which is some top-notch logistical work from Mr. Capulet. He's basically a wedding planner. With that done, everybody goes to bed, and that's Act 3, Scenes 2 through 4. So if we really want to understand Shakespeare, we gotta get deeper than just plot. Let's do a little analysis. This scene opens following Romeo and Juliet's first night together. Talking about teenagers having sex makes me very uncomfortable. But thankfully, Shakespeare has spared us the pages that would have come directly before this. The movie doesn't, though. There's a whole scene. They managed to hold on to their PG-13 rating, though, by employing a bunch of very strategic arm placements. The lovers are in something of an early morning stupor, and they are playfully arguing over a bird they heard outside the window. Juliet starts. "Wilt thou be gone? It is not yet near day. It was the nightingale, not the lark, that pierced the fearful hollow of thine ear." Nightingales, as the name implies, sing at night, but larks sing for the dawn. So Juliet knows it's the lark. We're just doing some fun denial, like don't go stuff. Romeo calls her bluff, saying he's willing to die if it means more time with her. Suddenly the nurse comes bursting in, which, knock. "Your lady mother is coming to your chamber. The day is broke. Be wary. Look about." Romeo dashes for the window, getting dressed on the way, and descends the wall. As Juliet watches him climb, she says, "My God, I have an ill-divining soul. Methinks I see thee, now thou art so low, as one dead in the bottom of a tomb. Either my eyesight fails, or thou lookest pale." So that's a bummer. Now, I've not brought this up since Act 1, Scene 1, when I warned you that Romeo, who was hiding from the sun, lurking about, being shifty, was quite possibly a vampire. Well, look where his mind goes. Juliet has just said he looks pale. "And trust me, love, in my eyes so do you. Dry sorrow drinks our blood. Adieu, adieu." I'm just saying. As Romeo slips away, in comes Lady Capulet. She takes one look at her daughter and mistakes her disheveled appearance to be from continued grief over Tybalt instead of what it really is, sex hair. She says, "Evermore weeping for your cousin's death? What, wilt thou wash him from his grave with tears? And if thou couldst not make him live, therefore have done." Some grief shows much of love, but much of grief shows still some want of wit. This is bad parenting, if you're wondering. From there, Lady Capulet speculates that maybe she's weeping not for Tybalt's death, but for the continued existence of that villain Romeo, who has been banished to Mantua and definitely didn't just sneak out of your house. Lady Capulet casually tells Juliet of her plan to send Romeo poison, then, with the murder planning done, Lady Capulet changes the subject. "Well, well, thou hast a careful father, child, one who, to put thee from thy heaviness, hath sorted out a sudden day of joy, that thou expects not, nor I look not for." "Madam, in happy time, what day is that?" "Merrily, my child, early next Thursday morn, the gallant, young, and noble gentleman, the County Paris, at St. Peter's Church, shall happily make thee there a joyful bride." At this news, Juliet is displeased. "This is too fast. I don't know this man, and I'm not ready to be wed. Tell Dad." But then her father strides in. Let's see how he handles conflict in the Capulet household. "How now, wife? Have you delivered to her our decree?" "Aye, sir, but she will none. She gives you thanks. I would the fool were married to her grave." "Soft, take me with you, wife. How will she none? Does she not give us thanks? Is she not proud? Does she not count her blessed, unworthy as she is, that we have wrought so worthy a gentleman to be her bridegroom?" "Unworthy? That's not necessary." Juliet says, "Not proud you have, but thankful that you have. Proud can I never be of what I hate, but thankful even for hate that is meant love." Mr. Capulet takes this in, then lays it out with unequivocal clarity. And here means if. "And you be mine, I'll give you to my friend. And you be not hang, beg, starve, die in the streets, for by my soul I'll never acknowledge thee. So do what I say or be disowned." The parents leave, and Juliet turns in desperation to her real mother figure, the nurse, the one who has raised her from infancy. "O God, O nurse, how shall this be prevented? Comfort me, counsel me. Alack, alack, that heaven should practice stratagems upon so soft a subject as myself. What sayest thou? Hast thou not a word of joy? Some comfort, nurse." But comfort is not forthcoming. The nurse does not rise to this occasion, and it is heartbreaking. She sums up the situation as she sees it. Romeo is banished and a murderer. Paul Rudd is here and 2020's sexiest man alive. Just shrug, shut your mouth, and marry Paris. Juliet takes in this advice. Then she forces a smile and thanks the nurse. "Well, thou hast comforted me marvelous much. Go in and tell my lady I am gone, having displeased my father, to Lawrence's cell to make confession and to be absolved." But the moment the nurse leaves, the act falls away. She curses this betrayal and resolves to visit the friar, saying, "If all else fail, myself have the power to die," in case this scene didn't have quite enough foreshadowing yet. And that wraps up Act 3. Act 4, Scene 1 opens on Paris asking Friar Lawrence to wed him and Juliet in 2 days' time. Paris apologizes for the short notice, not knowing evidently that this is something of a Friar Lawrence specialty. He's got some practice. In a bid to buy time, Friar Lawrence asks, "Why all the rush?" Paris says, "My father Capulet will have it so, and I am nothing slow," which means unwilling, "to slack his haste." Again, Father Capulet is an expression, not incest. Paris and Juliet are not related. But why so hasty, Paris? Immoderately she weeps for Tybalt's death. Now, sir, her father counts it dangerous that she doth give her sorrow so much sway, and in his wisdom hastes our marriage to stop the inundation of her tears, which too much minded herself alone may be put from her by society. And by society, I mean me and her doing married people stuff. Now do you know the reason of this haste? So we're gonna help her get over the death of Tybalt by forcing her to marry a stranger. The 1600s were weird. Ultimately, the friar agrees to marry them, and I'm really curious what his plan is at this point, because Juliet is going to show up here in a second, but he doesn't know that. So what was he going to do? Is there anyone here who knows a reason these two should not be wed? Other than me, I know a really big reason. But Juliet does show up, and there's some banter between her and Paris, and then he leaves so Juliet can confess. God shield, I should disturb devotion. Juliet, on Thursday early will I rouse thee. Till then, adieu, and keep this holy kiss. With Paris gone, she drops the act, and Juliet loses it. Juliet says, tell me not, friar, that thou hearest of this, unless thou tell me how I may prevent it. If in thy wisdom thou canst give no help, do thou but call my resolution wise, and with this knife I'll help it presently. God joined my heart and Romeo's, thou our hands, and ere this hand by thee to Romeo sealed shall be the label to another deed. Or my true heart with treacherous revolt turn to another, here she takes out a knife, this shall slay them both. Juliet is talking about suicide if they cannot find a solution. And while I never really believed Romeo the 19 times he alluded to it in this play, I really do believe Juliet. Quick note here, when she says slay them both, it leads some students to think that Juliet is going to kill someone here other than herself, like maybe Paris. She's not. She is talking of her heart and her hand. That's the both, it's herself. Anyway, it is her lucky day because the friar does have well, I'm not gonna call it a solution. It's more of an idea, really. Hold, daughter, I do spy a kind of hope which craves as desperate an execution as that is desperate which we would prevent. So that's a fun allusion to Hippocrates. He was a Greek physician and an all-around smarty. You've heard of the Hippocratic Oath. That's him. He put together a bunch of aphorisms. It's a bunch of sayings, one of which was, for extreme diseases, extreme methods of cure as to restriction are most suitable. You might not recognize that, but 2,000 years of sanding off the rough edges, and now we say desperate times call for desperate measures. The friar goes on. If rather than to marry County Paris, thou hast the strength of will to slay thyself, then it is likely thou wilt undertake a thing like death, to chide away this shame, that copest with death himself to scape from it. And if thou darest, I'll give thee remedy. So it's dangerous, maybe fatal, but if you're down, we may have a way out of this. Juliet says this, but what she means is, I'm in. Friar says, hold then, go home, be merry, give consent to marry Paris. Wednesday is tomorrow. Tomorrow night, look that thou lie alone. Let not the nurse lie with thee in thy chamber. Take thou this vial, being then in bed, and this distilling liquid drink thou off, when presently through all thy veins shall run a cold and drowsy humor, for no pulse shall keep his native progress, but surcease, no warmth, no breath shall testify thou livest. And in this borrowed likeness of shrunk death, thou shalt continue 42 hours, and then awake as from a pleasant sleep. That's intense. He's going to put her in a coma. And I have two questions. First, he had this bottle of living death on him? Does he carry this at all times? Can someone remind me what a friar is again? This seems outside the job description as I understand it. Second, this line has to be a lie, right? Awake from a pleasant sleep? I'm going with awake as with a brutal hangover. Listen, I've made some choices in my day that involved a loss of consciousness, and none of those stories ended with, and then I woke as from a pleasant sleep. Juliet, avoid bright lights, lots of water, bread, Advil. Ride it out, girl. Anyway, he continues. Paris is going to find you, tough beat for him, and then they will bury you in the vault where they put all you crazy Capulets when they die. So she gets to go kick it with Tybalt. Finally, he concludes, shall Romeo by my letters know our drift? And hither shall he come, and he and I will watch thy waking, and that very night shall Romeo bear thee hence to Mantua. Juliet takes the vial. Lawrence dispatches another friar to Mantua with a letter for Romeo, and nothing goes wrong at all. Nothing. In Act 4, Scene 2, Juliet returns to a household busy with wedding preparations. She falls to her knees in front of her father and begs his forgiveness, saying she will marry Paris. Big Daddy Capulet responds in typically brash fashion. He declares that they are moving up the wedding 24 hours and ignores anyone who thinks that's a bad idea. They can go die in the streets. Send for the county. Go tell him of this. I'll have this knot knit up tomorrow morning. Juliet goes to bed, and the household prepares to work through the night getting the wedding ready. And that's Act 4, Scenes 1 and 2. Act 4, Scene 3 opens to the nurse and Juliet picking out wedding clothes. Juliet asks to sleep alone because she has been so sinful in not wanting to marry Barris that she needs to pray. Finally alone, we get a moment to consider the choice that faces Juliet. She delivers a soliloquy which is going to walk us through 5 ways this could go wrong, each more terrifying than the next. Here we go. Come, Vial. What if this mixture do not work at all? Shall I be married then tomorrow morning? Here she pulls out a dagger and lays it on the bed. No, this shall forbid it. Lie thou there. So number 1, what if it doesn't work? I'll kill myself. Got it. On to number 2. What if it be a poison, which the friar subtly hath ministered to have me dead, lest in this marriage he should be dishonored because he married me before to Romeo? Well, there's a thought. That would really change up the friar's role in this play. This evil friar doing evil stuff, talking to plants. This play is missing a classical villain, so I guess it's possible. I fear it is, and yet methinks it should not, for he hath been tried a holy man. Has he, though? Possibility 3. How if, when I am laid into the tomb, I wake before the time that Romeo come to redeem me? There's a fearful point. Shall I not then be stifled in the vault, in whose foul mouth no healthsome air breathes in, and there die strangled ere my Romeo comes? So that's number 3, buried alive and then suffocating. But do you know what would be worse than suffocating in there? What if I don't? What if I survive and the tomb is full of ghosts? That's number 4. Or if I live, is it not very like the horrible conceit of death and night, together with the terrors of that place, as in that vault an ancient receptacle where, for these many hundreds years, the bones of all my buried ancestors are packed? Where bloody Tybalt, yet but green in earth, lies festering in his shroud, where, as they say, at some hours in the night spirits resort? I could be locked in and tormented by my dead ancestors, including Tybalt. And finally, number 5, what if, buried alive, tormented by ghosts, I go mad? Alack, is it not like that I, so early waking, what with loathsome smells, and shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth, that living mortals hearing them run mad? Or if I wake, shall I not be distraught, environed with all these hideous fears, and madly play with my forefathers' joints, and pluck the mangled Tybalt from his shroud, and in this rage with some great kinsman's bone, as with a club, dash out my desperate brains? Holy smokes, could I run so mad that I end up giggling while playing with my ancestors' joints, and then I pick up like a femur or something and I use it to dash out my own brains? Goodness. So that's 5 ways that this could go very, very wrong. It doesn't work and she stabs herself. It's actually poison so the friar can save face. It does work, but she awakes too early and suffocates, or she wakes too early, doesn't suffocate, and is haunted by ghosts of her forebears, or she wakes up, does not suffocate, goes mad, plays with his ancestors' joints, and goes clubbing. And with all of that considered, knowing fully well the stakes of this irreversible decision, this girl pulls the stopper from the vial, toasts to Romeo, and drinks it down. Good God. This is obviously a terrible decision, but you cannot deny she's got guts. Very plucky. I like what I'm seeing here. Moving on, Act 4, Scene 4 is utterly skippable. It's 3 in the morning and the household is in an uproar, racing to prepare for a wedding that isn't coming. It ends with the nurse heading upstairs to wake up Juliet. In Act 4, Scene 5, they find Juliet dead, and this is gonna sound terrible. I hope we've built up some level of rapport here, but it's kind of funny. Obviously, the household needs to realize she's dead, but Shakespeare has them coming up one at a time to find out. And each one starts all hopeful, like, let's get you married. And then we watch them learn the truth and they fall apart. And the minute they realize the terrible truth, the moment they get it, in comes the next character who's still back at stage 1 excitement. We do this for the nurse, for Lady Capulet, then Mr. Capulet, then Paris, and then the last character to show up is Friar Lawrence, which means, like, has this guy been downstairs the entire time, just sending people up, hearing them cry out and being like, maybe you should check on that? No. One at a time. It's dark, but it's funny. And when each character does find out, well, do you know how when you right click on a word and you go to synonyms and it gives you a list that makes your writing sound much smarter? That's basically what happens every time a character learns that she's dead. Look at these words that appear in this scene. Shakespeare is basically seeing how many words for bad thing he knows. With all the characters on stage, the friar takes over and commands people to stop yelling synonyms. Peace, ho, for shame! Confusion's cure lives not in these confusions. Heaven and yourself had part in this fair maid, now heaven hath all, and all the better is it for the maid. Your part in her you could not keep from death, but heaven keeps his part in eternal life. He's basically like, listen, we're all dressed up. We already booked the church. We got flowers. Guys, this could be worse. We need a box and to update the program slightly. They form a procession and leave for the church, and that is Act 4, scenes 3 through 5. Act 5 opens on Romeo in Mantua, telling us about a dream that he had. That, by the way, is always boring. Don't tell people your dreams. If I may trust the flattering truth of sleep, my dreams presage some joyful news at hand. My bosom's lord is lightly on his throne, and all this day an unaccustomed spirit lifts me above the ground with cheerful thoughts. Enjoy it while it lasts. In walks his servant Balthazar. Shakespeare was fond of that name. He used it in 4 of his plays. News from Verona. How now, Balthazar? Dost thou not bring me letters from the friar? How doth my lady? Is my father well? How doth my Juliet? That I ask again, for nothing can be ill if she be well. The news, my guy, is bad. Balthazar saw Juliet being taken to Capulet's monument, meaning the Capulet tomb, and laid inside. She's dead. Romeo, true to form, freaks out and declares he will kill himself. It's just what he does. He dismisses Balthazar, but not before closing a plot hole for the reader when he asks if Friar Lawrence has sent Romeo any letters. The answer is no, and Balthazar leaves. Alone again, Romeo conveniently lets us in on his plans. Well, Juliet, I will lie with thee tonight. Let's see for means, oh mischief, thou art swift, to enter in the thoughts of desperate men. I do remember an apothecary, it's like a pharmacist, which late I noted in tattered weeds, those are clothes, with overwhelming brows, culling of simples, which is like selecting herbs. Meager were his looks, sharp misery had worn him to the bones. Romeo figures someone as poor as this will sell him a poison, even though that act is punishable by death. When Romeo finds the apothecary, he doesn't miss words. Come hither, man. I see that thou art poor. Rude. Hold. There's 40 ducats. Let me have a dram of poison, such soon speeding gear as will disperse itself through all the veins, that the life-weary taker may fall dead. May fall dead. Yeah, that's what poison is. When the man won't sell, Romeo reminds him, famine is in thy cheeks, need and oppression starveth in their eyes, contempt and beggary hangs upon thy back. Listen, you are really, really, really poor, like so poor. The apothecary is like, you know what? You're right. I'm in. The apothecary takes the money and Romeo takes the poison and heads for Juliet's grave. And that's scene 1. Act 5, scene 2 is Friar Lawrence learning that his message for Romeo never got delivered. And that is a big deal. It turns out he dispatched another friar, Friar John, with a note saying, hey buddy, if you happen to hear that Juliet's dead, let's chat. Friar John didn't want to make the trip alone, so he went and found yet another friar. That's 3 friars if you're keeping score at home. But when he got there, town health inspectors, suspecting that we both were in a house where the infectious pestilence did reign, sealed up the doors and would not let us forth, so that my speed to Mantua was there stayed. COVID lockdowns, am I right? When Friar Lawrence, alarmed, asks who took the letter to Romeo, Friar John is like, you mean this letter? That's a problem. Friar Lawrence, ever a man of action, calls for an iron crow, meaning crowbar, and sets off to dig Juliet out of a tomb. How did she end up buried alive in the first place? Who can remember? And that's Act 5, scenes 1 and 2. Welcome to the final climactic and catastrophic scene of the play. All roads lead to this graveyard, and all characters who are still alive, except for my guy Benvolio, will turn up here in the middle of the night. And it starts with Paris, who is here to spread flowers on the grave of Juliet. So my natural instinct is to make fun of this guy. I mean, they have hardly spoken, and Juliet would rather die than marry him, but his grief is so painfully sincere that I really can't do it. Just know that I'm thinking it though, and I kind of feel bad. Paris commands that his servant go a little ways away and lay down, pressing his ear to the ground. If he hears footsteps approaching, because he's a human seismograph, I guess, he is supposed to whistle. So the Lone Ranger over here exits, leaving Paris to say, sweet flower, with flowers thy bridal bed I strew. Oh woe, thy canopy is dust and stones, which with sweet water nightly I will do, or wanting that with tears distilled by moans. Like I said, painfully sincere. Suddenly, he hears a whistle, and now Paris hides. There's a lot of hiding in this scene. Next, Romeo enters with Balthazar. He declares that he's going to enter the tomb for 3 reasons. 1, to behold my lady's face. 2, to take thence from her dead finger a precious ring, a ring that I must use in dear employment. And 3, something else, don't worry about it. Therefore hence be gone. But if thou, jealous, dost return to pry in what I further shall intend to do, by heaven I will tear thee joint by joint, and strew this hungry churchyard with thy limbs. Romeo's not in a great place. He gives Balthazar money and tells him to have a great life, bye. Now, Balthazar is supposed to leave. But he is such a finely tuned, highly sensitive, and empathetic man that he has picked up some subtle hints that maybe something is a little off with Romeo and this whole scenario. Go reread it if you need to, but I assure you, the hints are there. So he goes and he hides himself in the forest as well, meaning 3 people are now playing hide-and-go-seek in this graveyard forest thing. I hope it's a big stage. Romeo, now alone, is having feelings. He speaks to the tomb as he pries it open. Thou detestable maw, thou womb of death, gorged with the sweetest morsel of the earth, thus I enforce thy rotten jaws to open, and in despite I'll cram thee with more food. Paris is watching, and he recognizes Romeo's voice and or crowbar form. This is the guy who killed Tybalt directly and Juliet indirectly, since she died from grief over her cousin. I mean, not really, but that's what he thinks. He assumes Romeo is here to do some further mischief to Tybalt's body, which is dark, so he strides forward. Stop thy unhowled toil, vile Montague. Can vengeance be pushed further than death? Condemned villain, I do apprehend thee. Obey and go with me, for thou must die. Romeo agrees to the dying part at least, but not the leaving. I must indeed, and therefore I came hither. Good gentle youth, tempt not a desperate man. Then, in a heart-rending moment, he begs him to leave, saying, I beseech thee, youth, put not another sin upon my head by urging me to fury. Oh, be gone. By heaven, I love thee better than thyself. Paris refuses. Romeo snaps, and it's Tybalt all over again. He stabs Paris, who asks with his dying breath that he be interred with Juliet upon his demise. And with that, Paris dies. And it's sad because he really did love her. And balloons. Probably not in that order. Romeo honors his last wish and drags Paris's body along as he enters the tomb. Finally, his eyes fall on Juliet. Oh, my love, my wife, death that has sucked the honey of thy breath hath no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there. This is Shakespeare mercilessly driving home the brutal tragedy, making Romeo himself remark that, wow, she doesn't even look dead. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips, O you, the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss a dateless bargain to engrossing death. He kisses Juliet and then addresses the vial of poison. Come, bitter conduct, come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks thy seasick wary bark. Here's to my love. He drinks down the poison. O true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. Thus with a kiss I die. Goodbye, Romeo. In this moment, Friar Lawrence arrives. To his horror, he finds Paris and Romeo dead and Juliet just waking up. Her eyes fall on the friar and then she cuts right to the chase. Oh, comfortable friar, where is my lord? I do remember well where I should be, and there I am. Where's my Romeo? Friar Lawrence hears approaching footsteps. I hear some noise, lady. Come from that nest of death, contagion, and unnatural sleep. A greater power than we can contradict hath thwarted our intents. Come away. Thy husband in thy bosom there lies dead, and Paris too. Come, I'll dispose of thee among a sisterhood of holy nuns. Stay not to question, for the watch is coming. Come, go, good Juliet. I dare no longer stay. Juliet refuses to leave, refuses to hide, and so the friar dashes away. And now, alone, she makes quick work of it. What's here? A cup closed in my true love's hand? Poison, I see, hath been his timeless end. O churl, which means stingy, drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after. I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison yet doth hang on them, to make me die with a restorative. She kisses him, waits to die, doesn't, then hears more steps approaching. Ye, noise? Then I'll be brief. O happy dagger, this is thy sheath. There rust, and let me die. She stabs herself and falls across her true love's lifeless body. And with that, the tragedy is complete. Suddenly, the stage is filled with the Verona City Watch, citizens called forth by Paris's servant who ran for help when they started fighting. For a few beats, it is chaos as they discover the 3 bodies and apprehend the friar. Finally, the prince arrives and takes charge, followed by the Capulet parents. We learn that news travels very quickly in Verona. Lady Capulet says the people in the streets cry Romeo, some Juliet, some Paris, and all run with open outcry toward our monument. The watchman is happy to explain, "Sovereign, here lies the County Paris slain, and Romeo dead and Juliet dead before, warm and new killed." The watchman even knows the order. That's some really impressive police work. Time of death, 45 seconds after that guy. The Capulet parents are devastated, obviously. And with that, Mr. Montague arrives. He does so alone, saying, "Alas, my liege, my wife is dead tonight. Grief of my son's exile hath stopped her breath. What further woe conspires against mine age?" They drag Friar Lawrence forward and he lays out the whole thing over 40 lines. You get the secret marriage, the death of Tybalt, banishment, the forced marriage, sleeping potion, pretend memorial, the COVID-19 letter intercept, Paris's duel, and the double suicide. He says the nurse can back up his whole story, and then he says this: "If aught in this miscarried by my fault, let my old life be sacrificed." If. The balls on this guy. "And if I did anything wrong here, definitely let me know, oh God." The prince tells him, "It's fine. Don't worry about it. Go back to your plants and your crazy schemes. It's cool." Next, the prince calls forward the parents and confronts them with the fruit of their senseless feud. "Where be these enemies? Capulet, Montague? See what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love. And I, for winking at your discords too, have lost the brace of a kinsman," meaning Mercutio and Paris. "All are punished." The old enemies clasp hands and end the feud. Montague vows to make a golden statue to Juliet, and Capulet will raise one to Romeo. And with that, the prince brings us home with these final 3 couplets. "A glooming peace this morning with it brings. The sun for sorrow will not show his head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned, and some punished, for never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo." And that, friends, is Romeo and Juliet. Thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, check out onedayahead.com for more series, teaching materials, and marginal humor. Now that you're done watching the Romeo and Juliet summary and analysis series, go check out the Teaching Romeo and Juliet series as well. We'll see you next time on One Day Ahead.